So I watched a video the other day that said support builds don't work. And obviously it's not that simple, but I really liked the video. And what I want to do today is basically talk about support builds in Monster Hunter, because I feel that there is potential there to do something, but the idea in general, or the way that Monster Hunter in general presents supports, especially with Hunting Horn, is kind of incompatible with the main game design, which is you want to fight the monsters, right? So today I want to cover other types of supports that I've seen in other games, and things that I've seen in specific types of game design that Capcom could actually draw some inspiration from. Because playing a support can actually be very fun. I like playing support in games, and my favorite types of supports have been in things like MMOs, RPGs, or even like in MOBAs. So that's what I want to do today. It's not really a very scripted video, but whatever, I just want to rant about this. So the first thing is, I do want to recommend you guys the video from I Am Sasch. He actually has a very good discussion about the whole philosophy behind supporting specifically in Monster Hunter. I'm not going to go too much into detail about that, but I will say this. Supporting in Monster Hunter is kind of weird, because like the more you fight a monster, the more margin of error you can have during the fight. So if you make a healer build to support your team, you basically assume that everybody else will make mistakes, and you're trying to keep them alive. I think that this has its uses. I think that playing like this can be particularly good when you want your team and you to learn a fight. And actually, when Behemoth came into World, it was basically needed to have a support, because that fight was very MMO-esque, right? But in general, in Monster Hunter, you know, you don't need a support. And the main problem of Hunting Horn right now is that trying to do two things at the same time but not being able to do them well is kind of what's happening with these support builds. So I think in those contexts, playing a support assuming that your team will make mistakes can be good, because it gives everybody like more opportunities to keep fighting the monster, to keep learning from the fight. But when you get to the point where you want to farm, or you're actually going for a kill, I think that Hunting Horn can kind of feel like dead weight if you're building particularly to support. And this is because the damage interactions in this game are just too important, right? If you have a hunt where you have 4 people and the fight is scaled for 4 people, having one person that is doing half as much damage as everybody else immediately makes it so that the monster will be alive for longer, and you will increase the chances of mistakes happening, or just simply having things go south out of the blue, right? It's very easy to, like in games, this is something that can happen in many different types of games. Sometimes when you're still like learning a fight, it is very easy to have a situation just go completely wrong from one moment to the other, especially in particularly difficult fights, right? So that's kind of like one of the very interesting points that they cover, and they explain why, which is something that I find that it's great. If you're like playing supports and you want to play a support in Monster Hunter, you should really watch this video to get a new perspective. Now, having said that, the other thing that I really liked about that video is that the bottom line is that it doesn't really matter if you play with a support build or not. It's simply like having more perspective will allow you to then make more informed decisions of how you want to play and why. You can justify your decisions a lot better, which is something that like everybody should do if they want to engage with the gameplay a bit more, not just with the basic mechanics, but if you want to expand a little bit more, you know? Now, there's mainly 2 types of supports that I've seen in other game genres that have really interesting designs. So I've played many other different types of games, like RPGs, MMOs, and even MOBAs, and in those games, the idea of a support can be very varied. So the first MMO that I want to cover is World of Warcraft, and I want to talk about my favorite type of support in that game, which was the Disciplined Priest. In World of Warcraft, the way that combat works, especially in dungeons and raids, is you have to assume like especially from the perspective of a support, you have to assume that your team will receive a certain amount of damage. And it is your job as the support, or the healer in this case, because in Warcraft people refer more to them as healers instead of supports, but mostly all of them have utility skills as well. So it is your job to basically deal with that pressure that is applied by the damage that will happen no matter what, right? And depending on the encounter, sometimes you have to deal with more pressure, and sometimes you have to deal with like different mechanics that will really help your team to prevent damage from happening. And the reason why the Discipline Priest is my favorite healer from that game is because the Discipline Priest not only can heal your team very effectively, but it's also a class that heals your team based on the damage that you deal. Which is, to me, is a great idea, because now you're incentivized to engage with the mechanics, the core mechanics of the game, which is the combat, right? World of Warcraft is basically, you know, it's an RPG, there's a combat system, and playing a DPS is all about engaging with that combat system. And one of the things that happen a little bit, that I think that also happens with Hunting Horn, is that healers for a long time in that game were just like these like backseat gamers that would simply like heal everybody from the back, and if somebody made a mistake, you could like basically reprimand them for playing carelessly. But that's the thing, you know? It's like this idea, I feel like Hunting Horn sometimes can fall into that problem where they are just staying on the back, playing their songs and doing not much else. But the Discipline Priest in this case, it requires you by design to actively engage with the monsters and to fight, right? And that generates healing. Now, the best thing that priest has is that it has incredible damage mitigation skills. There were situations in the game where a boss could make like a very big AoE attack, something like the Eschaton Judgment, you know? And if you were smart and you were an experienced priest and you knew that this was coming, you could use some cooldowns, some specific abilities that usually have really long cooldowns that could completely trivialize the damage from those things. I think this could have made Alatreon a lot less controversial, because if Hunting Horn had a tool that prevented people from dying from Eschaton Judgment, if you didn't pass the DPS check, the elemental DPS check, the fight could have been a lot less controversial, because you have now alternatives, and Hunting Horn has something specific that makes it shine over any other weapon, especially in multiplayer, right? It's either you get good and you can pass the DPS check, or you can kind of have like a twist in the mechanics where you want to have a Hunting Horn on that fight now, because even if you're not really good, you can take your time, you can like kill the boss slowly, and you will survive the Eschaton in the end if the Hunting Horn is able to intercept that situation. And that feeling of being the support that becomes the hero for a moment, it's so good, man. It's something that I wish that you could experience more in Monster Hunter as well. Like, because of your experience and your decision making, you can save the group from a practically unsalvageable situation. That feels amazing. So the Discipline Priest had many tools, not to play reactively, but to play proactively. If you know what's coming and you prepare and you use your resources accordingly, you can prevent so much damage from happening, and the pressure that your group is feeling is reduced exponentially. And that feeling to me is just amazing. So I think that in the case of Hunting Horn, they could have a song that basically prevents or reduces the amount of damage that the group takes, maybe for a small time window, but that small time window is enough to save people that were just doomed to die, right? And I think that that could actually really feed into the savior fantasy that some people like to play, you know? The other support that I've seen that it's really interesting is the Lost Ark support. Lost Ark is an MMO that I actually hate, and it's a complicated story, but I will say this: Lost Ark had a combat system that in terms of design and quality is up there with the combat system of Monster Hunter. I'm telling you, that game has, like, it's one of the craziest, most well-polished combat systems. And so the supports in Lost Ark were virtually a battery for the party, and they could do one of two things. They basically had this very like this resource, this special bar that you had to charge with your attacks. So you would fight, you would attack the monsters, and you would charge your bar, and then you can spend that bar to either heal your teammates or to increase their damage. And both of these things lasted for very short windows. So the idea here is that every time that you spend these resources, you either do it because you need a moment where you need defense, or you need to push for the damage, which is something that could also work very well in Monster Hunter. Because imagine if Hunting Horn had a song that increases the damage that the party does, like by a crazy amount, like 30% damage increase for everybody for 5 seconds, right? If you did that during a topple, I can guarantee you that every weapon in the group, or in the game actually, can get their most damaging combos and like just have a huge window of damage during a topple because of your well-timed song. And so that's another layer now. Like you're not only playing these songs, you can also make decisions that can heavily impact the outcome of certain situations, simply because you had the proper awareness and you were able to synchronize or somehow time these songs in moments where you could make the most out of them. I think that type of design is actually really good for supports. It keeps you engaged. It makes you like pay attention to more things. It makes you want to look for different windows and different opportunities to actually engage with your group or with the monster. And so now it's not only about healing and keeping everybody alive passively, it's about playing proactively, which is, in my opinion, one of the best ways that you can play support in general. It's when you have these moments where you get to shine and you get to be the MVP because it was your decisions what saved or pushed a situation to a better place, you know? So yeah, that's what I have to say about the MMO supports. The other type of support that I know of is the MOBA support, specifically the supports in Dota 2. It was really difficult to get into supports in Dota because it was really confusing to me. I was coming from playing World of Warcraft or even like League of Legends. I played a little bit of League like during the prehistoric era. But the thing is, supports were still basically just like healers, and they always played reactively. Supports in Dota are designed to be extremely aggressive. And some of them also have this ability to save your teammates, to completely like prevent huge amounts of damage from happening, only if you're fast enough or if you're prepared enough to like react and to prevent things from happening, right? Like for example, let's suppose that somebody's going to get completely destroyed by a magical attack, and you can like apply a magic resistance aura to your party member, and so they survive now. But the other thing that they do in Dota is that supports are very aggressive. And that type of playstyle, I think, could really be compatible with the gameplay of Monster Hunter. Supports in Dota not only have the ability to prevent your teammates from dying in many times, but a lot of the times they are very aggressive and they want to try to disable the enemy in some way with stuns or maybe polymorphs or slows or things like that to allow your teammates to secure a kill, right? Dota really has an emphasis in this type of supporting where you're actually a menace when you're, especially during the early stages of the game, you are looking to make plays that will allow your team to have to like get kills basically, right? This is something that I've actually tried exploring in Monster Hunter. I think that the best support weapon in the game is actually Light Bowgun and not really Hunting Horn. Obviously, Hunting Horn is a lot more easily advertised as a support weapon because you have all these buffs that you can offer. But in my channel, I actually have a support build that didn't have a lot of like notoriety because, you know, I mean, it's Look at the fucking thumbnail. I didn't really think of any other way to make this work, but the intro is good at least. Looking for a completely unnecessary build? Well, look no further. Showcasing the brand new Swiss Army Hunter. I mean, come on, that's pretty funny. Anyway, so the thing is, that build has the ability to do many different types of ailments and different ways to control the monster. And I wanted to show you this because at some point in Sasch's video, they are talking, you know, about what's the best way to support, and they say something like this.
That they could introduce.
What would you suggest to someone that wanted to play a support set?
I would say the same thing that I've always said. You are going to struggle a lot more than you think you are, because you're going to run out of items. You're going to start doing no damage whenever you have the openings. You're going to start struggling to clear hunts because you're going to spend time worrying about getting hit, healing, and then dealing very little damage. The best way to keep a monster off of your friends is to keep it on the ground. And the best way to keep it on the ground is by doing damage. That's kind of where this whole idea of do more damage always comes from. It's not just about how efficiently you're farming. It's about keeping your friends safe. That would always be my advice. Understand that the decisions that you make are not in a vacuum. So if you want to go for healing, that's going to come at the cost of shorter hunts, dealing damage, and keeping the monster on the floor.
I always tell people, the shorter your hunt is, the less time you have where you could mess up.
Yep.
Here's an example of a 5-star tempered arc build. You know, back then when arc build was the only thing that you could farm. And this is the here I have an example of one of the like perfect executions that I managed to get on one of the many different groups, where I can open the fight with a sleep. I change the weapon while the monster is asleep, and I have the greatsword user wake up the monster with a TCS. And so I change to insect glaive, and then I go for a mount, followed by a paralysis, followed by a pitfall trap, followed by a shock trap, followed by a stun, right? So I just give my party this huge damage window where like, look at them, they are going crazy on the background, just like completely destroying arc build. This build actually has the capability of healing. I have wide range level 5, but that's it. The rest of my gear, I actually try to have more offensive abilities, because what I'm trying to do here is I do this sequence where I massively control the monster to allow my team to do as much damage as possible, which is, it actually proved to work very well, because most people in Monster Hunter, they know how to use their weapon, but usually they don't really know the best way to fight the monster. Anybody can do their rotation in Monster Hunter, right? It's just a matter of like going to some YouTube video, watch a guide, like 7-minute guide, and now you know the moveset of the weapon, right? Anybody can do their rotation. So my logic behind this was, if I allow everybody to do damage freely, I can actually draw more potential from the level of the players that I'm playing with by simply having the monster not move, which is basically the same philosophy as the supports from Dota 2, right? So I think this is another way that maybe supports can be played more in Monster Hunter, like having different builds that try to apply different crowd control effects to the monsters, so that your team just has a free window of opportunity to go off, to go completely ham against the monster. So this dynamic where you're basically disabling the monster and you're enabling the rest of your team to fight more effectively, I think it can be very helpful for people that are looking for a different experience when it comes to supporting, right? It's also very useful that these types of things, like traps and paralysis and sleep, these are things that have a very self-evident impact. Like, it doesn't matter how much actual benefit you get from these interactions, it just feels good that you're the one making them happen. It's like this feeling of, you know, everybody can go ham on the monster because I am here, like, enabling my team to get the most damage out of the situation. The last thing that I think could really it could really improve the experience of hunting horns in general, would be the ability to choose your music sheet. Very much like Bogans can customize like the gadgets that they have. I think that Capcom should allow the hunting horns to like choose. They should be able to just choose the music sheets, because that way you mainly focus on the type of hunting horn that you're using, depending on its qualities, depending on like the damage that it has, the raw, the affinity, the element. So that way you choose the hunting horn because of its properties. And then you can customize your music sheet for when you want to play solo or when you want to play support in a group. And that way you can kind of like cover all the options with that. It would be a lot more fun, in my opinion. It would allow this new layer of customization and playstyle, like player expression, to hunting horns. I think that could be really, really cool. And especially when you want to follow different goals with your build. Maybe you want to be more of a healer, so you have more damage reduction healing sounds. You want to be more of like an aggressive damage battery, so you go with the damage increase songs and the like attack up and all of that. So anyway, I think that in general, there's many things that Monster Hunter could do to improve the support experience overall, and to throw players that want to play support something like a bone, you know, so that they can now choose what experience they want to have, and it's not only about like playing the songs on the background and, you know, being happy that your buffs applied to the party count is really high. It's not a really good feedback system. I know that some people like that, but it doesn't tell you much on how much impact it actually had, you know? So anyway, this was just a little bit of a rant. I know that the video was a bit long. I'm not sure if I expressed every point that I wanted to make, but I like supports, especially when they can design them in a way that makes you feel like you can have the spotlight in a fight. That's the best type of design. It's when you can be the MVP because you healed at the appropriate moment, or you increase the attack of the group, and that allows you to achieve something that otherwise could not have been possible. That is the best type of support, because it gives you such a... like, nothing has given me more of a superiority complex than playing Discipline Priest in World of Warcraft, because I would purposely let people die if they if they misbehaved on the dungeon. So yeah, anyway, I hope you like this video. As always, really appreciate it if you do any of the things shown in the stickers. I'm trying to engage more with Twitter. I don't use it enough, but I've started using it a little bit, especially to like connect with other people. So if you want, you can follow me on Twitter. But that's gonna be it for today. Go watch the video from I Am Sasch. It's a very, like, his channel is such an underrated channel because he has so many videos with very informative things that you can learn about the game. And he's really mechanics focused. So if you want to know more about how Monster Hunter works just in general, go watch his channel. He's really good at explaining things. His editing is also very, very charming, you know? He has these very like silly edits where he shows his character talking and everything. I don't know, I think it's pretty good. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you around. As always, my name is I'll see you next time.